On June 11th, 1962, three men escaped from one of America's most secure prisons, Alcatraz. All three of these prisoners were well known in their own right, and together they were able to pull off an escape that even today has never been matched. Let's get into it. Frank Morris was a career criminal with a long rap sheet by the time he was 30 years old. In 1950, he was convicted for armed robbery and sentenced to 18 years. It wasn't long before he found himself in solitary confinement for trying to smuggle in a gun. This is where his time at Alcatraz began. The other man was John Anglin, who had committed a series of burglaries and robberies over a span of several years. He had also served time in solitary confinement for attempting to smuggle in a weapon. The third and final member of this group was Clarence Anglin, John's younger brother. Unlike his brother, Clarence had only one prior conviction for a robbery in Texas, but unfortunately, he had also tried to smuggle contraband into Alcatraz and was sent to solitary confinement for this offense. All three men were in solitary confinement when they hatched their plan to escape. They each occupied separate cells within the same block of cells. At night, while the guards would be making their rounds, they would creep out of their cells and meet up in one of the empty cells. There they would discuss their plan and work on it in secret. Their plan involved digging through the walls of their cells and hiding the progress with pictures of the Virgin Mary. This would allow them to tunnel into the cell next door, which was also empty. They could then make their way down the row of cells until they reached the end of the corridor. Here they would dig through the last wall and pop out into the prison yard. From here they would scale the fence and swim to freedom. At first, they used makeshift tools to dig through the concrete. But after a few weeks, they managed to get a hold of some real tools, including a hammer and chisel. The guards never caught on to what was happening because the noise made by their digging wouldn't carry beyond the heavy steel doors of the cell block. It was also helpful that the prison allowed inmates to spend 2 hours out of their cells each day. During this time, the prisoners would spread newspapers around their cells to catch any falling debris and help mask the sound. It took them about 14 months to complete the tunnel, but eventually they broke through the wall and made their way into the prison yard. Now, there was just one problem left to solve. How were they going to get past the high walls surrounding the prison yard? As soon as they stepped into the yard, they were met with 2 rows of razor wires set up on the top of the wall to prevent anyone from scaling it. The only way to get out of the prison without being spotted was to use a boat. But how could they get a boat close enough to the shore without the guards spotting them? The solution was for one of the prisoners to swim around the island to the other side. There they would find a small cove hidden by rocks that would shield any boat from being spotted. Once the boat was anchored in place, the other 2 prisoners would climb into the water and swim towards it. There were 3 things that they needed to take with them: life buoys, a rubber raft, and some life jackets. Their life buoys were fashioned from the sweatshirts and blankets that the prison gave them. These would serve as flotation devices to keep them upright in the water. But what about their rubber raft? Well, this was an interesting case. You see, the prison was located on an island in the middle of the San Francisco Bay, so naturally, the cells facing the bay had great views of the water. For many years, the prisoners in these cells would watch as the sea lions would play and lounge on the docks near the prison. In 1960, a new shipment of sea lions arrived at the docks. Among them was a large male that the workers nicknamed Moose. Moose was huge, easily weighing more than 300 pounds, and he became something of a celebrity among the inmates. Every day they would gather around their cells and watch him lounge on the dock below. One day, Frank Morris got an idea. He asked if any of the inmates knew how to carve wood, and sure enough, there was one inmate who did. Using only a toothbrush, he carved a mold for a rubber raft that they could use to float out to sea. Each evening, the prisoners would sneak down to the laundry room and mold a section of the raft. They worked on it in secret until it was finally finished. Now, all they had to do was wait for the perfect night to put their plan into action. On June 11th, 1962, they thought the coast was clear. All 3 men snuck out of their cells and made their way to the prison yard. From here, they slipped under the razor wire fence and waded into the freezing cold waters of the San Francisco Bay. As they swam toward the cove, they kept low in the water to avoid being spotted. When they reached the cove, They pulled themselves onto the beach and collapsed on the sand, exhausted but alive. One by one, they climbed into the rubber raft and pushed off from the shore. As they floated away from Alcatraz, they waved back at the prison. Then they started to drift off into the distance. The United States Coast Guard launched a massive search, but they were unable to locate the missing prisoners. To this day, it's unknown whether or not they made it to safety. Several years later, however, a life jacket and a blanket washed up on the shores of California, leading authorities to believe that the escape was successful. Despite their escape being labeled as 100% successful, no trace of the brothers or Morris has ever been found. Some believe that the men actually did make it off the island, but once they realized the extent of the manhunt, they went into hiding. Others believe that they drowned in the frigid waters of the San Francisco Bay. The government did everything it could to cover up the fact that 3 men had escaped from such a highly secured prison. Many people were fired or resigned from the prison staff as a result of the escape. Years later, a former guard came forward, claiming that the men had indeed escaped, and that the government had covered it up. In 1979, a movie based on the escape titled Breakout was released. It starred a young Clint Eastwood as an Alcatraz guard who was obsessed with finding the escaped prisoners. However, the film takes creative liberties with the actual escape. In reality, the men escaped by digging through the walls of their cells. In the movie, Eastwood's character believes that the men escaped by tunneling from underneath the prison yard. He digs a hole in his backyard and discovers a tunnel leading directly to the prison. He then follows the tunnel until he finds a hole leading to the sewers of San Francisco. There he spots one of the escapees and chases him through the tunnels. In the end, he captures one of the escapees, but he lets the other 2 go. As he walks away, we can hear one of the escapees say, "Thanks for the ride," implying that they have stolen his police car. The movie ends with Eastwood's character releasing the 2 prisoners from the trunk of a car. While the movie is entertaining, it's important to remember that none of it actually happened like this. We don't know exactly what happened to the prisoners after they escaped. All we know is that they were never seen again. After the escape, Alcatraz was never reopened as a prison. Instead, it was used to house military personnel during the Vietnam War. Today, it's a popular tourist destination and a National Park Service site. Over 1.3 million people visit the island every year. Some people still claim that the ghost of Frank Morris haunts the island, warning people of the dangers of trying to escape. If you visit the island today, you can still see the spot where the 3 men escaped. It's marked with a plaque that reads, "In memory of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, who, on June 11th, 1962, in a daring feat of prison escape, walked barefoot into the sea and disappeared into the fog." Thank you for watching. See you next time.